It was a Tuesday night at Rowan and Coney, one of those glossy white tablecloth places where people go to be seen, not to be heard. And the room was humming like an instrument tuned wrong when a man stood up so fast his chair screamed across the floor and his voice cut the air. Who cooked this? Conversations died mid-laugh. Utensils hung in the air, and 80 strangers turned slow as a film reel toward the same place. A server standing by the kitchen doors with a tray balanced like its nothing name tag Maya Rivera. She doesn't flinch. She just looks at him. And at that moment, the invisible becomes visible. My name is Maya. Well, it's the name I answer to now. And I worked at Rowan for 6 years before that night. I carried plates heavier than the tips I brought home. I smiled when men called me sweetie and darlin', and kept my mouth shut when they assumed I was there to refill water, not to argue about technique. I lived in a tiny studio in Queens, and that little kitchen, a hot plate and one saucepan, was my laboratory. I woke at 5 some mornings, tested spice blends, wrote ratios in a battered notebook. I had a scholarship waiting in an envelope once, École de Lumière Lyon, full ride. I'd packed my life for it until my father's heart gave out 3 days before my flight. Bills stacked up my mom needed help, and Paris got folded into a drawer with my recipes. So I cooked in other people's kitchens instead. I started in dish pits, learned to move without breaking anything. Then learned heat timing, how to coax flavor out of the cheapest ingredient. At Rowan, under glass chandeliers and better-than-it-should-be reviews, I was a server. They told me I had presents for tables. Presents, they meant, look pleasant, sell the wine, don't make waves. But being next to the line every night, I saw how things really worked. How the head chef, Colton Hayes, depended on certain tricks but never asked why his sauces split, why a protein came out dry, despite his perfect temp on paper. When a dish fell apart and the dining room paid attention, someone would grab it, patch it, send it. Most times that someone was me. You learn a lot by watching and then doing it at midnight when no one's around. I paid the night janitor $20 so I could use the line after hours, practice Sears test, butter emulsions, and write down what worked. I'd tweak a sauce until the sickly taste turned sharp and bright, or I'd add a single note, smoked paprika, a whisper of coffee grounds, that made a dish stop being a thing you ate and start being a thing you remembered. These were not spectacular decisions in my mind, they were fine-tuning the stuff that made food breathe. But when Colton took credit for the same fixes during lunch rush, no one asked where that magic came from. That Tuesday, Everett Cole showed up. Investor, headline maker, the sort of guy whose picture runs next to op-eds about disrupting jobs with automation. He came with a small entourage, 2 venture partners, a writer, a consultant, and a few kitchens, he said, were a perfect machine problem. Remove the variable, he told his guests while tipping his chin toward the room, and you remove the heartbreak. The restaurant humored him. The staff bristled. Colton sweated because this particular table could make or break whatever next big thing he was trying to impress. Mid-service, a line cook burned the Brussels sprouts. A small stupid thing that will ruin a pass if it goes out. There were 3 minutes before the plates had to go. Colton swore fast and low. The Sioux looked at the clock. He called my name. Not loud, not pretty, but it carried a meaning. Fix it now. I had 4 tables, the usual smile. I had 8 minutes, that's all. Inside the kitchen I moved like I'd done this 1,000 times, because I had. Trim, the char add, fresh florets deglaze with bourbon brown, the butter until it smelled like toasted sugar, a touch of honey, a pinprick of smoked paprika to make the fat sing, and a spritz of apple vinegar to cut the whole thing. Finishing salt last. Plate it fast, slide it out. Nobody in the dining room saw the hands that saved the plate except the cooks who knew. Diego, the kid who grew up 2 neighborhoods over, watched through the pass and mouthed, "Why don't you tell them?" and I just smiled. The plate hit Everett's table. He made his usual patter about systems and precision. He took a bite of the steak. Competent, he said, and shrugged, but when he tasted the sprouts, something shifted. He stopped mid-sentence. The fork lessened. He cut another piece, chewed, and the room became very, very quiet. Then he stood up so fast the sound of his chair scraping made the chandelier rattle, and he asked loud enough for everyone, Who cooked this? Colton stepped forward with the practiced confidence of a man who owns the stage, but Everett would not accept it. No, this is not yours, he said. The word landed like a fist. Diego, tired of being part of a cover-up, said what he'd been holding Maya did, and the room rotated to me. 19 people and counting, pulling out phones, faces, leaning, breath held. I felt like someone had peeled my skin back and set me out under the lights. He called me over, asked me to tell him everything, ingredient by ingredient, ratio by ratio. When I said bourbon to butter, 1 to 3 honey after the alcohol burns off, he looked at Colton, then back at me, and the air changed. Everett laughed without happiness and said, $40 million, and my algorithm can't do what you just did. Then he made me an offer. Tender, ridiculous, performative 30 minutes, any dish I chose, $10,000, his camera's on. Do it for me, he said, and prove it's not luck. Imagine the decision. Walk away, keep your rent money, keep sending whatever help you can home, or step into a kitchen where you are not supposed to belong, where every tool you touch could be checked. Shotgun. Scrutiny from a room full of strangers and a billionaire who thinks he owns the story. I tied my apron back on, the kitchen one, not the serving one, and asked for the kitchen to myself for half an hour. Clear everyone out, no interruptions. They did. Colton protested, that's my line, but Everett waved him silent. The table wanted the show. We gave Maya, me, the space. I washed my hands like a surgeon stood over a piece of beef that had been waiting for the kind of attention it rarely got in a lunch rush, a beef shank dense and patient. In my head, the dish had already existed. Bourbon braised shank, blackberry gastrique, celery root puree, charred broccolini. New, but made of things I'd practiced at midnight for years. I seared the meat until it screamed at the pan, deglazed, added stock herbs, slid it into the oven. The room smelled like something remembered. Caramel smoke, something that makes people stop pretending to eat. I moved fast blackberry into a pan, sugar vinegar reduced until it sang. Celery root peeled and boiled, then turned into the silk of a puree with butter and a whisper of nutmeg. Broccolini charred at the last cruel second to give the dish an edge. I plated with tweezers, not tongs, a small thing, but it shows intent. I finished with lemon zest, 5 flakes of Malden, a tiny touch of cracked pepper. 30 minutes later, I walked out with a plate that felt like a truth. Everett tasted. He closed his eyes, then said what he rarely does. You changed my thesis. The room exploded into a noise I could feel in my ribs. Applause, yes, but also a release from the people who had watched this play out for years in sullen silence. Colton stood pale as linen. Diego whooped from the pass. Mrs. Rosa Delaney, an elderly woman who had always asked for my section and tipped like she was planting seeds, stood first and clapped slow and deliberate. Chef Simone Mercer, a real-deal name who'd been a quiet patron, stepped forward and asked if I'd considered training under her, and a production company wanted to film investors slid card after card across a table. Paris sent a letter reopening a scholarship application like a hand held out. But the thing that mattered most was not the deals. It was the way my voice sounded when I finally used it. When I said in front of everyone I've been cooking at that level for a long time, you just never asked, and it wasn't a whisper anymore. That night, I felt 7 years of being seen wrong shift into something like recognition. The video went viral. My phone won't stop buzzing. Offers came in that felt like other people's books, chef positions, TV a publisher, but I wanted something different. I wanted a place where people who'd been overlooked could learn to cook without the weight of someone else's assumptions. So I chose a middle path. Mentorship that taught me how to run a place, an investor who promised me autonomy, not control a small loan, and a plan, a restaurant named Rivera. Simple, honest. Where we hire skill over credential, heart over resume. Where formerly incarcerated cooks immigrants, older cooks with stories come to work, learn, and be seen. We opened 6 months later in a sunlit corner of a borough people forget, with art on the walls from friends and a small plaque in the old kitchen that says, "Here, Maya was seen." This story ends with applause in the room, but it starts a conversation outside it. Because the problem wasn't one bad boss or one lucky night, it was a system that mistakes uniform for ability color for station and resumes for worth. How many Mayas walk past you every day? The barista who writes poems at night, the school bus driver with a degree, the janitor who can fix engines. And how often do we look and move on? I want to know what you think. Was Everett right to make the show of it, or did the crowding cameras cheapen something that should have been quiet and real? Did Maya deserve the spotlight, or would you have done the same thing and stayed quiet to keep your stability? Tell me if you've ever been underestimated, or if you've ever seen someone invisible make themselves known. Drop a comment below. Argue, agree, tell your story. And if this hit a nerve, hit subscribe because there's more of these hidden stories out here waiting for their moment. What are you carrying that the world hasn't seen yet? And what would it take for you to step into the kitchen